I should have known the night would end in chaos when the ski lift groaned above the Harper family's gala, its cables snapping like a whip in the aspen wind. One second I was sipping mineral water by the stone fireplace, watching my sister Celeste preen about her new private jet. The next, a scream tore through the chalet as the lift plummeted, a tangle of steel and glass crashing into the snow just yards from where I stood. The crowd froze, champagne flutes trembling in manicured hands. I felt the ground shake, my heart lurching as I realized I'd been standing in that lift's shadow moments ago, adjusting my scarf in the frosty air. Someone had tampered with it. I knew it in my bones. The question wasn't just who, but why they wanted me dead. The Harper family's monthly dinners at our mountaintop chalet were never about love or legacy. They were battlegrounds, where wealth was the weapon and status the prize. My sister Celeste, with her diamond-sharp smile, always led the charge, tossing out boasts like grenades. Tonight she was in rare form, her voice cutting through the chatter as she described her latest toy, a Gulfstream G650 for her Aspen to Miami commutes. "It's not just a jet," she purred, swirling her wine. "It's freedom, darling. You wouldn't understand." The table laughed, a practiced chorus of sycophants. My mother, Vivian, joined in, her Lake Tahoe estate purchase the next trophy on display. "Panoramic views," she said, her eyes glittering like the chandelier above. "You can't put a price on serenity." I sat quietly by the fireplace, the warmth licking at my back as I clutched my glass of mineral water. Serenity? They wouldn't know it if it bit them. I hid my smile behind the rim, letting their ignorance fuel me. They thought I was Abigail Harper, the family failure, scraping by in a rented Denver condo, a washed-up startup founder who'd never amounted to much. They had no idea I was the architect of a $4,500,000,000 zero-cents empire. Pinnacle Ventures, a juggernaut of tech ventures, luxury resorts, and urban developments. They didn't know I'd bought Harper Summit Resort, the very chalet we sat in, 6 months ago through a labyrinth of shell companies they'd never trace. To them I was a ghost. To the world, I was a titan. The fire crackled as my father, Roland, leaned forward, his voice sharp enough to slice through the room's hum. "Abigail, you're awfully quiet tonight. Something on your mind?" His eyes narrowed, not with concern but with suspicion, as if my silence was a rebellion he couldn't tolerate. I met his gaze, steady and unyielding. "Just enjoying the show?" I said, my voice soft but laced with an edge I knew he'd catch. Celeste smirked, tossing her hair. "Oh, Abby, still sulking in that little Denver rental." "What's it like living paycheck to paycheck?" Vivian chimed in, her pity as fake as her Botox. "Sweetheart, you really should get serious. Invest in something real, like property. You're not getting any younger." I let their words slide off me like snow on a steep slope. They thought they were wounding me, but every jab was a reminder of the power I held. They didn't know I owned the Denver complex they mocked, a historic Art Deco gem I was restoring with care, preserving its vintage charm and protecting its tenants from the kind of gentrification my family worshipped. They didn't know Pinnacle Ventures was a name whispered with reverence in boardrooms from Silicon Valley to Sydney, celebrated for its ethical investments and community-first ethos. They saw a failure because I let them, for now. The gala buzzed around us, a kaleidoscope of wealth and ambition. Waiters glided with trays of caviar and truffle-infused hors d'oeuvres, their black vests blending into the shadows. The chalet's floor-to-ceiling windows framed the snow-dusted peaks of Aspen, a view that screamed privilege. I leaned back in my chair, my thrifted wool coat draped over the armrest, a deliberate contrast to Celeste's fur stole and Vivian's designer gown. They thought my modesty was poverty. I knew it was strategy. Erland cleared his throat, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. Speaking of investments, have you heard about the raid on our Denver resort block? Some mystery firm swooping in, probably to gut it for condos? His words hung heavy, drawing nervous glances from the table. I kept my face neutral, though my pulse quickened. I was that mystery firm. Pinnacle Ventures had acquired the block not to destroy it, but to save it, restoring its 1920s architecture, reinforcing tenant protections, and turning it into a model of sustainable urban renewal. They'd never suspect me, the dropout they pitied. Celeste leaned in, her eyes gleaming with gossip. It's probably some foreign tycoon, right? They love snapping up legacy properties. Vivian nodded, her pearls clicking softly. Whoever it is, they're ruthless. I heard they're planning to evict everyone by spring. I sipped my water, the coolness grounding me. Evict? I'd spent millions ensuring those families stayed, their rents capped, their homes preserved, but I said nothing, letting their assumptions build the stage for my eventual reveal. The conversation shifted, but the air felt heavier, charged with unspoken tension. I excused myself, stepping onto the chalet's terrace to clear my head. The night was crisp, the stars sharp against the velvet sky. I pulled my coat tighter, my breath clouding in the cold. That's when I noticed the ski lift wreckage in the distance, cordoned off with yellow tape, security guards milling about. My stomach twisted. I'd ridden that lift earlier, a quick trip to the upper lodge for a moment of solitude. The cables hadn't just failed, they'd been cut, the sabotage deliberate. Someone wanted me out of the picture, and they weren't subtle about it. I returned to the table, my mind racing but my face calm. Celeste was mid-rant about her jet's custom interiors when she turned to me, her smile venomous. Abby, if that Denver deal goes south, you'll be out on the street, won't you? Come stay in our guest house. We'll take care of you. Her offer dripped with condescension, a lifeline laced with thorns. Vivian nodded, her maternal mask slipping into place. It's time to stop playing small, darling. You're a Harper. Act like it. I'm happy where I am, I said, my voice steady. My landlord's great. The lie was effortless, a shield I'd perfected over years of their disdain. They didn't know I was the landlord, the owner, the one calling the shots. They didn't know I'd built Pinnacle Ventures from a single-seed investment into a global force, all while they flaunted their ill-gotten gains. But the ski lift crash gnawed at me. It wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration of war. Back at my Denver penthouse the next morning, I sat at my glass desk, the Rockies sprawling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. My assistant, Nora, slid a tablet across to me, her expression grim. We've got a problem, Abigail. Someone's leaking our acquisition plans to Celeste. The Denver block deal was flagged in an internal email chain. Her team knew details they shouldn't. My blood ran cold, a mole inside Pinnacle Ventures. My inner sanctum, feeding secrets to my sister. This wasn't just betrayal, it was espionage. A knife aimed at the heart of everything I'd built. I scrolled through the leaked emails, my fingers trembling. Celeste's team had specifics, property valuations, tenant agreements, even my restoration timelines. Someone close to me was playing both sides, and the stakes were higher than ever. If Celeste connected me to Pinnacle, my carefully laid plans would unravel before I could strike. I leaned back, the city's skyline a stark reminder of what I stood to lose. Find the mole, I told Nora, my voice low, and double security on all our systems. No one gets access without clearance. The day blurred into meetings and encrypted calls, but the ski lift crash lingered like a shadow. I couldn't shake the image of those severed cables, the screech of metal as the car plummeted. I'd escaped by inches, but the next attempt might not miss. That evening, I drove to my Denver condo. The one my family mocked, the one I owned outright. The Art Deco building was my pride. its brass fixtures and terrazzo floors a testament to a bygone era I was determined to preserve. But as I pulled into the underground garage, my headlights caught something wrong. My car's tires were slashed, the rims scraping pavement. I froze, my heart hammering. This wasn't random vandalism. Someone had followed me, waited for me, and left a message carved in rubber. "You're not safe." I called Nora, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. "Get security to sweep the building. Someone's targeting me." As I waited for the team, I stood in the garage's dim light, my breath shallow. The ski lift, the mole, now this. Someone was closing in, and they weren't just after my secrets. They wanted my life. I clutched my phone, the weight of my empire pressing against me. Pinnacle Ventures wasn't just a company. It was my defiance, my proof that I could build something better than the Harper legacy of greed. I wouldn't let them take it. The security sweep found nothing. No prints, no cameras, just the eerie silence of an empty garage. I returned to my condo, locking the door behind me. The space was modest by design, a deliberate contrast to my family's opulence. Exposed brick walls, a vintage typewriter on the desk, a single orchid by the window. This was my sanctuary. But tonight it felt like a cage. I poured a glass of water, my hands shaking as I replayed the day, the gala, the crash, the mole, the tires. Each piece fit into a puzzle I couldn't yet solve, but one thing was clear. Someone knew more than they should, and they were coming for me. I opened my laptop, pulling up Pinnacle's internal logs. The leaked emails stared back, a digital betrayal I couldn't ignore. I cross-referenced employee access, narrowing the list to 3 suspects. A junior analyst with a suspiciously lavish lifestyle, a CFO who'd been dodging my calls, and a board member who'd attended Celeste's last charity event. One of them was feeding her my plans, and I'd find them, no matter the cost. But as I worked, my phone buzzed with a new email, the subject line chilling. "You can't hide forever. No sender, no signature, just a single line. Step back, or the next crash won't miss." My breath caught, the words searing into me. This wasn't just a corporate game anymore. Someone was playing for blood, and I was the target. I forwarded the email to Nora with a single instruction: trace it. Then I leaned back, the city lights blurring through my window. I'd spent years building Pinnacle in the shadows, letting my family underestimate me while I amassed power they couldn't fathom. But now, the shadows were turning against me, and I had to decide, stay hidden or step into the light and fight. The next morning, I stood in my penthouse office, the Denver skyline a jagged reminder of my resolve. Nora burst in, her face pale. "Abigail, we traced the email. It came from an IP address linked to Harper Summit Resort. Someone on their network." My stomach dropped. The threat wasn't just close. It was inside my family's inner circle. Celeste, Vivian, Roland, any of them could be behind it. Or worse, someone they'd hired to do their dirty work. I gripped the edge of my desk, the wood cool under my fingers. "Lock down our servers," I said, "and get me everything we have on the resort staff. Someone's talking, and I want their name." As Nora left, I opened a drawer, pulling out a file I hadn't touched in years. It was a contract, notarized and binding, from the night I'd saved Harper Summit Resort from bankruptcy. I'd wired $500 million, 0 cents from my personal funds, a desperate move to keep the family's crown jewel afloat. In return, I'd secured a 15% non-dilutable voting stake, active unless I resigned. A resignation I'd never given. They'd forgotten, or maybe they thought I had. But this was my ace, the leverage that could topple their empire. I traced the signatures. Mine, Roland's, Vivian's, Celeste's. They'd signed away their control, and now I'd use it to take it back. I closed the file, my resolve hardening. The ski lift crash, the slashed tires, the leaked emails, the threatening email. They weren't just attacks, they were distractions meant to scare me into submission. But I wasn't the Abigail they knew, the quiet sister who'd bowed to their whims. I was Pinnacle Ventures, the force they'd never seen coming. I slipped the contract into my bag alongside a USB drive with encrypted backups of every deal, every audit, every secret I'd Tonight, I'd attend another Harper family dinner, playing the role they expected while I planned their downfall. But as I stepped into the elevator, my phone buzzed again. A text, anonymous, "Check your brakes before you drive." My blood froze. I glanced at the parking garage, my car waiting in the shadows. Someone was watching, waiting, and they weren't done. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I walked to my car, my heels clicking against the concrete, and checked the brake lines myself. They were intact. For now. But the message was clear. Every move I made was being tracked. Every step a gamble. I slid into the driver's seat, my hands steady on the wheel. The Harpers thought they'd buried me, but they'd only lit the fuse. Aspen's peaks loomed in my mind, as cold and unyielding as the fight ahead. They wanted a war, I'd give them one they'd never forget. The wind howled outside my Denver penthouse, a restless beast clawing at the glass as I stood at my desk, the city's skyline a jagged crown against the night. The anonymous text from last night, "Check your brakes before you drive," still burned in my mind, a taunt I couldn't shake. I'd checked the brakes, found them intact, but the message wasn't about the car. It was about control, a reminder that someone was watching, waiting, plotting. The ski lift crash at the Harper family gala had been no accident, and neither were the slashed tires in my garage. Someone wanted me scared, silenced, or worse. But I wasn't the Abigail Harper they expected, the quiet sister who'd bend under pressure. I was Pinnacle Ventures, a $4,500,000,000 zero-cents empire built on grit and secrets, and I was done playing their game. I opened my laptop, the screen's glow casting shadows across the room. Nora's email sat at the top of my inbox, marked urgent. Leak confirmed. Source is internal, likely board level. Audit packets ready for tomorrow's dinner. My stomach tightened. A mole in Pinnacle, feeding Celeste my plans, wasn't just a betrayal. It was a declaration of war. The audit packets Nora mentioned were my weapon. A meticulously compiled dossier of my family's fraud. $15 million, 0 cents, siphoned from Harper's Summit Resort. The chalet I'd secretly bought 6 months ago. Celeste's $8 million, 0 cents private jet. Vivian's $5 million, 0 cents in fake consulting fees. Roland's silent complicity. It was all there, in black and white, ready to tear their empire apart. But the mole meant they might know I was coming, and that changed everything. I paced the room, my bare feet sinking into the plush rug. The Harper family dinner tomorrow night loomed like a storm on the horizon. They'd invited me, expecting the same meek Abigail who'd sat through their taunts at the gala, sipping mineral water while they mocked my humble Denver condo. They didn't know I owned that condo, that block, that city's future. They didn't know I was Pinnacle Ventures, the hostile offshore investor they whispered about in panicked tone. Roland had let it slip at the gala, his voice heavy with dread. Pinnacle's audit could ruin us. Whoever they are, they're digging deep. I'd bitten back a smile then, my second-hand coat a perfect disguise. I was the investor, the auditor, the reckoning. And tomorrow, I'd walk into their chalet with a Chanel suit and a truth they couldn't. But the threats were escalating. The ski lift, the tires, the leaked emails. They were pieces of a puzzle I couldn't fully see. I opened a drawer, pulling out the contract from the night I'd saved Harper Summit Resort. $500 million wired from my personal funds, a lifeline when the resort faced foreclosure. In return, I'd secured a 15% non-dilutable voting stake, a clause they'd forgotten or assumed I'd lost in the chaos of their betrayal. My fingers traced the signatures, mine, Roland's, Vivian's, Celeste's. They'd signed away their power, and now I'd use it to take it back. But as I closed the file, my phone buzzed with a new alert. Security breach detected at Pinnacle HQ. My heart stopped. Nora's team had flagged an unauthorized login. Someone had hacked my office servers, downloading sensitive deal files, including the Denver block acquisition. I called Nora, my voice sharp. "What did they take?" Her reply was grim. "Everything. Valuations, tenant contracts, your restoration plans. They've got enough to sabotage the deal or expose you before you're ready." I gripped the phone, my mind racing. This wasn't just a leak. It was theft, a surgical strike to cripple Pinnacle before I could strike back. The mole wasn't just feeding Celeste information. They were dismantling my empire from the inside. "Lock down the servers," I said, "and get me a list of everyone with access to those files. I want names by morning." I hung up, the silence deafening. Someone close to me was a traitor. And the clock was ticking. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my desk, combing through employee records, cross-referencing access logs with travel schedules. The junior analyst with the flashy new car, the CFO who'd missed our last 3 meetings, the board member spotted at Celeste's fundraiser. They were my suspects, but I had no proof. Each name felt like a betrayal, a crack in the foundation I'd built. Pinnacle wasn't just a company. It was my defiance, my proof that I could rise above the Harper legacy of greed. Losing it would mean losing myself. I rubbed my eyes, the city lights blurring beyond the glass. Tomorrow's dinner wasn't just a showdown. It was a gauntlet, and I had to walk it alone. The next morning, I stood in my penthouse closet, the Rockies sprawling beyond the window like a challenge. I slipped into a tailored Chanel suit, its navy silk sharp against my skin, a quiet declaration of power. No more thrifted coats, no more hiding. I was done playing the underdog. My bag held the audit packets, legal filings, and a press release that would shake Aspen's elite to their core. Nora arrived at 9, her tablet buzzing with update. "The audit packets are bulletproof," she said, sliding them across my desk. "Celeste's jet purchase, Vivian's fake invoices, Roland's shell companies. It's all here, cross-referenced with bank records. They can't deny it." I nodded, my jaw tight. "And the hack?" Nora's face darkened. "We traced the breach to a VPN, but it's a dead end. Whoever did this knows how to cover their tracks into boundless possibilities." I leaned back, the weight of her words settling in. The hack wasn't just a theft. It was a warning, a shadow moving closer. I thought of the ski lift, the tires, the anonymous text. Someone wasn't just playing dirty. They were playing for keeps. "Double security at the chalet tonight," I said, "and keep digging. I want that mole's name before I walk into that boardroom." Nora nodded, but her eyes held a flicker of worry. "Abigail, your board's nervous. If you reveal yourself as Pinnacle's CEO, it could tank our valuation. Investors hate surprises." I met her gaze, unflinching. "They'll survive. My family won't." The drive to Aspen was a blur of snow-dusted pines and twisting roads. My car, a sleek black Tesla I'd bought after my first billion, hummed quietly, but my mind was loud with strategy. The Harpers expected me to crumble, to beg for their scraps. Instead, I'd walk into their chalet with the truth in my hands and fire in my veins. But as I rounded a curve, my dashboard flashed a warning. System failure. The steering locked, the car veering toward a cliff's edge. I slammed the brakes, my heart pounding as the Tesla skidded to a stop inches from the drop. I sat there, breath ragged, the Rockies mocking me from below. The brakes hadn't failed. They'd been hacked, the car's software overridden. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone had tried to kill me, and they were getting bolder. I called Nora from the roadside, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. Get a tech team to sweep my car. Someone's in the system. I didn't wait for a tow. I hiked to a nearby lodge, rented a nondescript SUV, and continued to Aspen. The attempt on my life wasn't just a threat. It was a challenge, and I'd answer it with blood and ink. By the time I reached the Harper chalet, the sun was sinking, painting the peaks in hues of fire and ice. The chalet glowed, its windows warm with lies. I stepped out, my Chanel suit catching the light, my bag heavy with truth. The valet raised an eyebrow, recognizing me, but not the woman I'd become. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Inside, the air was thick with wealth. Candlelight, crystal, the clink of glasses. Celeste held court at the head of the table, her laughter sharp as a blade. Vivian sat beside her, her Tahoe estate story now embellished with tales of celebrity neighbors. Roland brooded at the far end, his whiskey glass sweating in his hand. I took my seat by the fireplace, the same spot I'd claimed at the gala. My silence a weapon they didn't understand. Celeste's eyes flicked to me, her smile tightening. "Abby, you made it. Still slumming it in that Denver rental?" Her voice was honeyed poison, drawing chuckles from the guests. Vivian leaned in, her pity rehearsed. "Darling, you could do so much more. Why not leverage your startup contacts? Help us with this Pinnacle mess." I sipped my water, my pulse steady. "I stick to small ventures," I said, the lie smooth as silk. "Nothing on your scale." Celeste snapped, her composure cracking. "God, Abby, stop leeching off the family name. Do something for once." The table fell silent, eyes darting between us. I didn't flinch. I let her words hang, a noose she'd tied herself. Roland cleared his throat, his voice low. "Speaking of Pinnacle, their audit's a problem. They're digging into our accounts. Jet purchases, consulting fees, everything. If they're offshore, we're screwed." His fear was palpable, a crack in the Harper facade. I hid my smile, my second-hand coat draped over the chair, a relic of the Abigail they knew. They had no idea I was Pinnacle, the shadow they feared. The dinner dragged on, a parade of boasts and veiled insults. I played my part, nodding, smiling, letting them dig their graves. But as dessert was served, lavender panna cotta, pretentious as ever, my phone buzzed with a text from Nora. "Fire at your condo, gas leak, get out of Aspen now." My blood ran cold. I excused myself, slipping into the chalet's study, the oak-paneled walls closing in. Nora picked up on the first ring. "Abigail, the fire department's there, but it's bad. The gas line was cut. Someone set it to trap you." I gripped the phone, my condo's brick walls flashing in my mind. I'd been in Aspen, not Denver, but the message was clear. They knew where I lived, and they'd burn it down to stop me. I returned to the table, my face a mask of calm. Celeste raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay, Abby? You look pale." I forced a smile. "Just work." But my mind was racing. The ski lift, the car, the hack, now the fire. Someone was orchestrating a campaign to destroy me. The mole, the threats, the sabotage. They were connected, and the answer was in this room. I glanced at Roland, his eyes fixed on his glass. Vivian, his smile too tight. Celeste, her confidence a veneer. One of them was pulling the strings. Or they'd hired someone to do it. I had to move faster, strike harder before they struck again. The next morning, I stood in my penthouse office, the Rockies a silent witness to my resolve. Nora handed me a burner phone, her voice urgent. "We found the mole. It's the CFO, Marcus. He's been funneling data to Celeste for months." My chest tightened. Marcus, the man I'd trusted with Pinnacle's finances, had sold me out. "Fire him," I said, "and leak his termination to the press. Let Celeste know her spy's gone." Nora nodded, but her eyes held a warning. "There's more. A rival firm, Apex Capital, is threatening to expose you as Pinnacle's CEO. They've got fragments of the hacked files." I froze. Apex wasn't just a competitor. They were vultures circling for a kill. If they outed me before I was ready, Pinnacle's valuation could crash, and my family would pounce. I opened my bag, the audit packets heavy in my hands. Tonight was the Harper Summit board meeting, my chance to end this. I'd walk into that boardroom, not as Abigail Harper, the family scapegoat, but as Pinnacle's scapegoat, the woman who'd bought their legacy and exposed their lies. I slipped into a tailored Chanel suit, its lines sharp as my resolve, and checked the press release one last time. It was damning. A public unveiling of my identity and their fraud, set to drop the moment I revealed myself. But as I left the office, my phone buzzed with a new threat. "Boardroom's wired. Speak and you're done." My breath caught. Someone had bugged the chalet, ready to record my every word. The mole was gone, but the puppet master remained. I drove to Aspen, the road a gauntlet of ice and shadow. My helicopter was grounded. "Engine failure," the mechanic said, his voice heavy with suspicion. "Another sabotage, another brush with death." I gripped the wheel, the chalet's glow a beacon in the dusk. The boardroom was a battlefield and I was walking in unarmed, but I had the audits, the contract, the truth. They'd underestimated me for years and that was their mistake. I stepped into the chalet, the air thick with tension. The board was seated, Roland at the head, Vivian and Celeste flanking him like sentinels. They mistook me for a consultant, their eyes skimming over my suit as if I were invisible. I set my bag down, my voice steady. "Good evening. I'm Abigail Harper, CEO of Pinnacle Ventures, and I own Harper Summit Resort." The room imploded. Vivian gasped, her hand clutching her pearls. Celeste stammered, her face draining of color. Roland's pen clattered to the floor, his eyes wide with betrayal. I distributed the audit packets, each page a nail in their coffin. $15 million embezzled, I said, my voice cutting through their shock. Celeste's jet, Vivian's fake invoices, Roland's shell companies. It's all here and it's over. Celeste lunged forward, her voice shrill. "You're lying. This is a setup." But the board members flipped through the packets, their faces grim. Roland's voice was a whisper. "Abigail, please, we can fix this." I shook my head. "You fixed nothing for years. I'm cleaning house." The room spun with accusations and denials, but my phone buzzed with a new alert. Forbes, Pinnacle Ventures CEO revealed as Abigail Harper, Harper Summit owner. The press release had dropped early, a leak I hadn't authorized. The media storm was instant, phones lighting up around the table. I stood, my heart pounding. Someone had forced my hand, exposing me before I could control the narrative. Celeste's eyes gleamed, sensing an opening. "You'll crash and burn, Abby. Investors hate surprises." But I wasn't done. I pulled out the contract, slamming it on the table. 15% voting stake, signed by all of you. I'm not just the owner. I'm the majority voice. "You're out." The boardroom erupted. But I didn't stay to watch. I walked out, the chalet's warmth fading behind me. Outside, the snow fell, soft and relentless. I'd won, but the victory felt hollow. The threats, the sabotage, the mole, they weren't over. As I reached my car, a masked figure lunged from the shadows, a blade glinting in the moonlight. I dodged, my training from years of self-defense kicking in. The figure fled, but not before dropping a keychain with Apex Capital's logo. My breath caught. Apex wasn't just a rival. They were the puppet master, orchestrating the attacks to destabilize me. But why? I drove back to Denver, the keychain burning a hole in my pocket. At my condo, the fire damage was stark, charred walls, shattered windows. I stood in the ruins, my orchid wilted on the floor. The gas leak hadn't been an accident. It was a trap, meant to kill me if I'd been home. I called Nora, my voice raw. Apex is behind this. Find their connection to Celeste. She didn't hesitate. On it. But Abigail, there's something else. Your brother Ethan just landed in Denver. He wants to meet Ethan. My estranged brother, gone for a decade, now back when my world was imploding. Why now? What did he know? The next week was a whirlwind. Harper's Summit stabilized under my reforms. Transparent budgets, tenant protections, local partnerships. Vivian quit her elite boards, her reputation in tatters. Celeste's firm collapsed, her jet seized by creditors. Roland, humbled, joined my venture mentorship program, his eyes heavy with regret. But the questions lingered. Who sabotaged my helicopter? What was in the encrypted files stolen from my office? Was Ethan's return a coincidence or a new threat? Was Celeste's desperate lawsuit backed by Apex or someone bigger? And the Harper Trust Fund, rumored to hold billions, vanished years ago. Where was it? At a Denver community gala, I stood by a fountain, watching my family mingle with tenants they'd once ignored. Vivian listened to a retiree's story, her face soft with shame. Celeste helped kids string lanterns, her laughter genuine for the first time. Roland shook hands with a local baker, his pride replaced by humility. I'd rebuilt the Harper legacy, not with greed, but with integrity. As fireworks lit the sky, I felt it. Stillness, not silence. I'd faced fire, blades, betrayal, and won. The fight wasn't over, but I was ready. I whispered to the night, let them come. And somewhere in the shadows, I knew they would.